The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the luxurious Manhattan penthouse as Isabella Martinez sat alone on her Italian leather sofa, surrounded by the trappings of success that now felt like golden chains. At 28, she was the youngest VP in her company's history, owned a penthouse worth millions, and had just closed a deal that would secure her financial future for life. Yet, as she stared at her reflection in the darkened window, she had never felt more empty. The past year had been a whirlwind of achievements and accolades. Fashion magazines featured her as one of New York's most powerful under 30. Her Instagram boasted 500,000 followers who envied her glamorous lifestyle, the red carpet events, designer gowns, and exclusive parties with celebrities and business moguls. But behind the perfectly curated posts and dazzling smile lay a soul drowning in loneliness. Isabella's rise to the top had come at a cost. Relationships had been sacrificed on the altar of ambition. Her family in Los Angeles felt like strangers now, their weekly calls becoming monthly, then barely existing at all. Friends had been replaced by networking contacts. Love had been postponed indefinitely for the pursuit of the next promotion, the next deal, the next milestone that promised fulfillment, but delivered only more emptiness. That particular Tuesday evening, as she sat in her $8,000 dress from a charity gala she'd attended alone, Isabella made a decision that surprised even herself. She needed air, space, anything but the suffocating silence of her perfect prison. Grabbing her coat, she stepped into the New York night. The streets were unusually quiet for Manhattan, the rain having driven most people indoors. Isabella found herself walking aimlessly, her designer heels clicking against wet pavement as she passed glowing storefronts and cozy restaurants filled with people who seemed to possess something. She had lost genuine connection. 3 blocks from her building, she noticed him. An elderly man sat on a bench under a flickering streetlight, completely soaked from the rain. His clothes were worn but clean, and despite his circumstances, there was something dignified about his posture. He wasn't asking for money or attention. He was simply sitting there, watching the world pass by with eyes that held stories of a lifetime. Something about his stillness and the chaos of her internal storm drew Isabella toward him. As she approached, she could see he was shivering, his thin jacket offering little protection against the October chill. "Excuse me," she said softly, her voice barely audible above the rain. "Are you all right?" The man looked up, and Isabella was struck by his eyes, kind, weathered, but twinkling with a warmth that seemed impossible given his circumstances. He appeared to be in his 70s, with silver hair and deep lines that spoke of both sorrow and joy. "I'm fine, dear," he replied with a gentle smile, "just enjoying the rhythm of the rain. It's quite beautiful when you really listen to it." Isabella paused, struck by his perspective. When was the last time she had stopped to listen to anything beyond the constant noise of her ambitions? "You're soaked," she observed. "There's a cafe just around the corner. Would you like to get warm? My treat?" The man's eyes crinkled with gratitude. "That's very kind of you, but I don't want to impose. Please," Isabella insisted, surprising herself with a genuine concern in her voice. "I'd actually appreciate the company." The man introduced himself as Walter, and as they walked to the small family-owned cafe, Isabella learned fragments of his story. He had been a music teacher for 40 years before retiring. His wife of 52 years had passed away 6 months ago, and he had been struggling to find his place in a world that suddenly felt too big and empty without her. "I come to that bench sometimes because it's where Margaret and I had our first date 60 years ago," Walter shared as they settled into a corner booth. "She always said the rain made the city look like it was crying happy tears." As Walter spoke about his late wife, Isabella found herself captivated, not by his words alone, but by the way his face lit up despite his grief. Here was a man who had lost everything that mattered to him, yet he spoke of love and beauty with such reverence that it made Isabella's chest ache with recognition of what she was missing. "What about you, dear?" Walter asked, cradling his coffee cup like a precious treasure. What brings someone so elegant out into a storm like this? Isabella hesitated. She wasn't accustomed to genuine interest in her well-being. Usually, people wanted to network, to gain something from her success. But Walter's question held no ulterior motive, just human curiosity and care. "I was feeling lost," she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I have everything I thought I wanted, but I feel like I'm living someone else's life." For the next 2 hours, they talked. Walter shared stories of his students, of the young minds he had shaped, and the joy he found in watching them discover their own voices through music. Isabella found herself opening up about her dreams, deferred her childhood love of painting that she had abandoned for business school. Her fear that she had become so focused on the destination that she had forgotten how to enjoy the journey. Success, Walter mused, is a strange thing. Society teaches us to chase it like it's the finish line, but I've learned that it's really just the starting line for the question, now what? As the cafe prepared to close, Isabella felt a familiar panic rising. She didn't want this connection to end. When was the last time she had a conversation that fed her soul rather than her portfolio? "Walter," she said, as they prepared to leave, "I know this might sound strange, but meeting you tonight has reminded me of something I had forgotten." "Thank you." Walter stood slowly, his aged frame carrying the weight of his years and grief. "Thank you, Isabella, for reminding an old man that kindness still exists in this world." They stood outside the cafe, the rain having softened to a gentle mist. The city lights reflected in puddles around them, creating a magical ambience that made the moment feel suspended in time. Isabella looked at this man who had become, in just one evening, more real to her than most people in her carefully curated life. Without thinking, without calculating the appropriateness or her image, Isabella stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Walter in a gentle hug. The embrace lasted only seconds, but in those moments, something profound shifted. Isabella felt the walls she had built around her heart crack open. She felt Walter's surprise melt into gratitude, his frail body relaxing into the unexpected comfort. For both of them, it was a reminder of human connection in its purest form. No agenda, no transaction, just one soul offering comfort to another. When they parted, both had tears in their eyes. "Thank you," Walter whispered. "I haven't been hugged since Margaret passed. I forgot how much I needed it." Isabella nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. In giving comfort, she had received something invaluable, the reminder that she was human, that beneath her titles and achievements, she was still capable of genuine compassion. That night changed everything. Isabella began visiting Walter regularly. She learned that he lived in a small apartment near the bench, scraping by on Social Security. She helped him apply for programs he was entitled to, used her connections to ensure he received proper care, and most importantly, she listened to his stories and shared her own struggles. Through Walter's eyes, Isabella rediscovered her love of art. He encouraged her to start painting again, and her penthouse, once a showcase of expensive but soulless, began to fill with canvases that captured the beauty she was learning to see again. Walter introduced her to other seniors at the community center where he volunteered. Isabella began teaching financial literacy workshops there, using her expertise to help people navigate retirement planning and budgeting. For the first time in years, her skills felt purposeful rather than just profitable. The transformation was gradual but undeniable. Isabella's social media posts began to feature less of her material possessions and more of her volunteer work, her paintings, and the genuine friendships she was building. Her family, noticing the change in her voice during their calls, began reaching out more frequently. She started dating again, but this time looking for connection rather than just compatibility on paper. 6 months after that rainy night, Isabella stood in a small gallery in Brooklyn, surrounded by her paintings. It was her first art show, a modest affair compared to the corporate galas she usually attended, but her heart had never felt fuller. Walter sat in the front row, beaming with pride as if she were one of his former students who had just performed their first recital. You know, Walter told her as they stood before her favorite piece, a painting of two figures sharing a moment of connection under a streetlight. Margaret always said that love was just paying attention to someone else's heart. That hug you gave me that night, that was love, Isabella. And it saved us both. Isabella squeezed his hand, understanding now that success wasn't about reaching the top of some imaginary ladder. It was about having people who mattered to lift up as you climbed, and being willing to be lifted in return. The simple hug that had lasted mere seconds had created ripples that would last a lifetime. It reminded two lonely souls that in a world obsessed with achievement and accumulation, the most powerful force remains our capacity to see and comfort one another. Sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest transformations. Sometimes all it takes is one moment of authentic human connection to remember who we really are beneath all the roles we play. And sometimes a simple hug can change not just someone's day, but their entire life. Like and subscribe for more videos.